today about is potentially a little bit dry compared to what Mike had talked about, particularly to people that aren't using ZBrush on a day-to-day basis. But I think it gave me an opportunity to talk about something a little bit different that I actually think is a part of my workflow. And that is optimization, at least in part optimization. And I want to do a brief demo, not specifically a sculpt demo, but just something that I've recently started using Z Remesher for. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about creating real-time assets for game use just straight out of ZBrush using decimation. So when we talk about optimization within the context of ZBrush, ZBrush is a fast program, and anyone who's used it realizes that compared to other modeling applications, but no application is immune to abuse by its users. And this kind of amusing image of a fat flash is what I consider to be a good analogy for that. This is by Gwinchi on DeviantArt, so proper credit to Gwinchi. But this fat flash is a file unoptimized in ZBrush that can get quickly out of hand. This is something, again, that's not unique to ZBrush. Any application that's writing massive amounts of data over the course of a large modeling project. I mean, some of our modeling projects, I mean, they could last anywhere from a month or more, depending on how complex that model is. You get this creeping death of file saves and processing on your file. And it's something that you quickly become jaded to, or you just start to become desensitized to. And so the first part of that is to actually just be aware of its existence and to take measures as you're working on very, very intense files to combat it. So within the context of ZBrush, over here on the side we have divide, append, divide, append, divide. Duplicate your objects, and this is kind of how I work. I kind of tend to duplicate a lot of things and modify them. It's a workflow that works for me. I always feel like making something and then duplicating it and then modifying it to fit a different part of my model is always faster than building it from scratch, though I do a lot of building from scratch. It keeps me my tools honed, it keeps my modeling skills up. So over here on the other side, it's like, what do we do? We're never going to counterbalance this. That's the whole point, is to create a massive amount of data. And but there are measures that I take throughout my modeling process to combat the effects of those divisions. So first up, and probably at the top of the list, is to just kind of look at some of the session and project options in ZBrush. Things that will control your file on a topmost level. You can use a lot of subtools. Mike exhibited that earlier. There are a lot of reasons for that. They aren't explicitly about the file size as much as just minimizing processing workload within your ZBrush file. Divide with reluctance. And I think this one is something that a lot of new users into ZBrush will forsake. They'll basically just blast straight to high details, but there are reasons for staying low long. And then localized optimization. This is something that I could actually spend probably the length of time that all three of us have talked about. It's something that I think everybody finds their own ways of doing this, and sometimes you're doing it, you're not realizing you're doing it, but at any rate, I try to kind of take an active role or active measure in this regard. So looking at the actual session and menu options, all of these things up here actually affect your ZPR files. Many users aren't actually saving ZPR files if you're just modeling in ZBrush. The ZPR will include things like materials and rendering settings and things like that. But nonetheless, I want to look at these because the ones here on the right are actually actively going on whether you realize it or not. You're basically a part of your quick saves. This optimize button here, I talked to Paul about it earlier. He actually said that that optimize button would affect your quick saves. So the skip history and the maximum duration there on the left, I feel like Pixelogic generally has a fairly good setting there for the maximum duration. I feel like it's fairly judicious for my day-to-day usage, but if I'm working on something really, really intense, I'm having a long time saving, then I'll go ahead and modify that as well. Another thing I want to talk about here that actually I don't have a slide for, but it actually affected me a few days ago. I had loaded in a bunch of ZTLs, and I was actually extracting parts and pieces from one model and actually appending them to another, but left that model open. And whenever it goes to save your project, it's actually including all that data. So pay attention to delete all in the subtool menu. And if you're working on a ZTL that you're not actually working on, but you've loaded it up, you're not working on it, you actually used it as a reference or pulling components from it, go ahead and purge that thing out with delete all. And I had like something like a 4 gigabyte file, and it actually threw an error at me about that. So just be knowledgeable about that one as well. You can never have too many subtools. This is a model that I actually pulled up that I had done for Gears 3, which is 63 subtools, and that pales by comparison to the one that Mike had done. The funny thing about, I actually want to just mention this, is it's a complete aside, but whenever I showed Mike this slide, he's like, I didn't know that was in there. He had actually gone through and physically like counted every one of his subtools across all those ETLs to come up with that slide. And the aside there is just real. I mean, he and I actually share the same office, and we've shared it for 4 years or more. And I know this feature's been in here for at least that long. So just talk to your coworkers. I mean, we talk all the time, and somehow it still didn't get propagated across. But it's probably a feature that people don't use very often, but he did. At any rate, in regards to subtools, we break our things up as much as possible. When you think about a real-world object, something that's been machined, it's comprised of a lot of components that are different materials and stuff like that. So break your mind of a workflow that entails having to have everything like in single compartments. I used to model that way whenever I was sub-D modeling because it seemed like it was the cooler way to do things, but really, basically, real-world objects are compartmentalized. The other thing that this does is, in terms of efficiency, is it means that whenever you go to, optimize or work on a particular subtool, the processing for ZBrush is not hitting a large amount of geometry. The other thing that, of course, Mike touched on is the fact that you can later utilize those breakouts for texturing. So this is something, we've long been a fan of ZBrush, and he's always harped on and been a champion of working at low divisions and moving up in divisions much slower than a lot of people probably would. And I think his reason for that is primarily an artistic one for flow and retaining a very more control over things for a longer period of time. And I'm looking at this from more of an optimization, while what he says is entirely wise, and it stands to reason that it's wisdom. What I want to say is that basically I will stay away from that division over there on the right as long as I possibly can. And generally speaking, only like 5 to maybe 10% of my modeling time is spent on that side. And part of it is because of Zach's reasons, but it's also keeping your file a smaller size longer, and you're not spending a lot of time at those divisions. And I do that pretty much across an entire model. So if I had like, my 60 subtools, I'll only go to that highest division when I absolutely need to. So optimizing preemptive. Some of these options, this is one of those things, if I were to talk, like I said, if I talked about optimization, as I mentioned earlier, this particular section, it could take me an hour because it's something that spiders out, and one thing that I talk about, I can talk about something else. But optimizing preemptive, this is basically, if I'm working particularly on hard surfaces, these are hard surface features, or at least I consider them as such. The new panel loops feature, which is freaking awesome if you've not used it, and the extract double. These are on by default in ZBrush, but if I'm working on armor plates or something, I will leave those off if I don't need them, so I don't have a lot of back faces that are causing overhead in my file. Secondarily, part of my mind cycles is I'm working on a model, particularly if I've got some downtime waiting for some feedback or something, I'll just go through and try to see if there's back faces that can be deleted with delete hidden, and I'll delete loops using the new delete loops feature for things that are a little bit more coplanar, just try to rid myself of some waste in my file. And all of this, another thing I wanted to stress was that you don't want to spend so much time on this, and the reason I say I do it kind of in my downtime, you don't want to spend so much time on it that it's actually offsetting and burdening you down. It's just something you kind of do whenever you have the time for it. So basically, this shield shape here, I call it a shield shape. It could be a shield, it could be a small section of a large piece of armor. It's something that I just quickly concepted up for the sake of SIGGRAPH today. And basically what I want to do is I'm going to run through a video of me sculpting it up to a stage, and then subsequently I'll go in and add a couple of components in ZBrush. So basically I'm utilizing a Dynamesh sphere here and actually using a lot of the same tools that Mike had used, Move, Clay Polish, Trim Dynamic, to just basically, I started with a center shape and I'll work my way out. A lot of times I'll do that where I start on a focal point. And I'm just appending a sphere, continuing the same thing, and then basically just roughly forming things in using a lot of the Move tool. Move tool. I use that just like Mike does to create bulk shapes. Dynamesh, once it got in there, I utilize it all the time. There I'm adding a plane, and I actually reconstruct divisions on the plane to actually reduce it down to the point where I can move it around with a little bit more aggression. And I'm going to subsequently use the slice tools here, the slice curve, to actually add new poly groups. And then I will actually use the panel loops to actually pop those off into extrusions. Moving around, I actually add another layer dimension back here, a little thickness to it. You'll see me kind of struggle a little bit as I go through this thing working in profile view. And that's because as I'm concepted it, I had no idea what the thing looked like from the side. It was kind of elvish looking. Here, I actually create another component using a sphere. And then basically, I'm kind of overstating the fact whenever I do this, but you'll see me shortly. I go ahead and delete back faces on this, knowing that I'm going to replicate it. And this is actually something that I would probably pay more attention to on either really, really high poly objects or things that I knew I was going to replicate a lot, which we do a lot of repeated shapes. Here, curve tube probably would have been better for this, but basically I stretch out a sphere, and then once it's in position, what I'm going to do is retopologize it using the retop tool. And the reason I do that is because I want a really, really strong cross-section to this thing, and it would be very difficult to sculpt that. You could do it, but it would take a while. So I crease that, and then refine that shape a little bit more. I'm sorry this is going so fast. It's basically impossible to show something like this going on in real time without you guys just yawning all day long. Like I said, I continue to kind of rework it from the side, get a little bit more of an organic flow to it. Rather than actually duplicating the front face, like I was talking about with the extrude or the shell or panel loops, I actually just created a new piece of geometry back there, knowing that needed to be didn't need all that detail on the front. I return to that shape, refine it a little bit more, and then I take it about 75% of the way, and then actually clay polish just to sharpen it up. And then I'll continue to refine it a little bit more after the clay polish. A lot of times clay polish will create warbles and stuff in the topology, but a little bit of relax on that will actually fix that problem. So there's a lot of things that are actually in this video that will probably be completely rewritten in my workflow moving forward because of the ZBrush. That tool, if you've not dabbled with it, is worth the price of admission. So that is basically where I wound up with at the end of that sculpt session. I can't remember exactly how long it took me. I want to say it was a couple of hours. So basically, these are the components that were omitted, purposely omitted from that. I'm going to go ahead and try to build these quickly in ZBrush. These are particular shapes that, in my opinion, are extremely difficult to sculpt. And so I'm not going to sculpt them at all. I'm going to force ZBrush into more of a sub-D modeling capacity to do that, which is something that previously, especially in ZBrush's earlier years, people faulted it for. But I believe it's actually becoming as strong a modeling package in terms of hard surfaces as some of the traditional sub-D modeling programs. So, all right. So, actually, I'm still not quite back to there's the default. I don't really use a lot of hotkeys in my workflow, which thankfully I'm kind of used to that because this setup is completely uncomfortable to me. But I'm not sure exactly why I don't use a lot of keyboard shortcuts in ZBrush, but there are a few that I'll probably point out using this workflow, especially doing hard surface stuff, that I find are extremely important. Some of those would be things like geometry, modify topology, delete hidden is something that I would almost definitely create a hotkey for. Things like crease would be something that I would create a hotkey for. I just recently started using crease a lot, and I absolutely love that. I find it's almost invaluable. So basically what I'm going to do here, to add these little sweeping components to this mesh, let's start with this component here, which is a separate subtool. I'm going to duplicate it using subtool, duplicate, go to the geometry tab, and delete lower on that. That basically is getting rid of division history so that you can utilize curve tube snap. And I'll talk a little bit, if I can find it here. So curve tube. There we are. So curve tube snap. I'm going to go ahead and increase my draw size here. Draw a quick curve along that. So basically, in duplicating that object, I created a substrate on which to attach that. So what I'm going to do is Control-Shift-Click to isolate that component. If we basically look at it as a whole, it's still attached to the substrate. So from there, like I said, hotkey, delete hidden. And then I'm going to ZBrush this, and in ZBrushing it, I'm going to turn on half and turn adaptive off. And what that's going to allow this thing to do is reduce this thing down to its like absolute minimalistic shape. So turn off solo, and we're exhibiting our entire model again. I'm going to grab the move tool. And right here, I'm going to crank my Z intensity up to 100. And this is going to give me the authority to move this thing around. I'm going to turn off dynamic. Dynamic is actually awesome, but I generally speaking will leave it off for move because I find myself doing a lot of large movements, especially early on in my modeling stages. So basically, again, not used to my keyboard getting quite so far away. Reducing my draw size down to like almost a pinhead. It's giving me a lot more precision on it moving. Again, basically what I'm doing here is just a different method of creating this shape that I did up here. And I really prefer this method. It's this shape is something, particularly on these long, fin shaped objects, sculpting on them can be very, very tedious if you're trying to create something that's very regular in shape. I'm a big fan of these kind of swooping, kind of elven looking things. So basically, in moving these points out, I'm defining where I want the high point of this cross section to be. So what I'm going to do from here is actually create a crease on this mesh. There's a variety of different ways to do this, but I want a very defined crease here. And you have a tool called Crease Curve. I actually prefer to do this with geometry visibility. So easiest way to isolate very, very local polygons is to do Select Lasso. The cool thing about Select Lasso is that you still have access, if you kind of hop, you still have access to your rectangular selection as well. So using the lasso, you're going to actually hide groups of polygons. So, and then come up here to crease, and crease those polygons. I'm probably going to want a sharper edge out here on the edge than I have on the outside, than I have on the end. I like to almost kind of like what Zach was talking about with the curves and straights. I really like these sharp lines moving into curves. So just do another crease. And so once divided up, you can see that hard cross section there, and you can actually, continue to go back down, refine this shape a little bit more. The fact that the crease is not actual geometry actually kind of ties back into what I've been talking about in terms of optimization. I'll basically try to use as little geometry as possible as often as possible. So, and maybe that's just years of training as an actual 3D artist for games where optimization is key. So I get to sit and fiddle with this and actually kind of merge it in a little bit better, but it kind of gives you the overall impression. I feel kind of like we're running a little bit low on time. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just do that one more time. I want to do it here on this surface as well. I'll go ahead, if we've got the time, I'll just go ahead and do this up. It's going to bother me if I don't. So, the life of a 3D artist, right? So, that's good enough. Good enough. So, I'm going to grab, okay, that's where I am, or I have left. Okay. So, I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to basically do the same process. I'm going to duplicate this to be a substrate on which to put the curves down. So, just go up to Subtool, duplicate, geometry. Just going to delete higher and lower. All I really need it to be is close enough to where it's going to snap to the surface. Go ahead and grab my curve to snap, which should be up here in there. Use brush, there we are. So, again, eventually I'll probably wind up doing, if I use this technique a lot, I'll probably wind up doing a insert mesh brush that actually is very kind of, actually has that triangular cross section. So, basically I'm going to do the same process. Control Shift click on this little guy. Got it hidden properly. Modify topology, delete hidden. ZBrush, set it to half, turn off adaptive. Remesh it. So actually I am going to use a slightly different process here because in a lot of cases it will work perfectly to use the default crease tolerances up here. So I'm just kind of start to shape it first before I commit to a crease. reference there. Oh, I need my move tool. That would help. Some larger movement too. Just the flow. And again, you could probably divide this back surface up and then create an appropriate alpha for this. But I would generally say that I'm probably able to sculpt this. It's such a unique shape, really, in terms of just curvature, that an alpha for it would be kind of a one-trick pony. I might use it just once. So I may as well just model it. That's the way I look at it. You kind of have to look at, pick your battles, try to figure out. You know, Mike had an excellent point about his alphas I use. He and I have very, very similar workflows, so trying to come up with something unique from him is absolutely impossible. In fact, we find in talking to or watching some of the other demos that a lot of the other great guys who are up here have similar techniques and tips that we do. So I'm totally botching this one, but I'll just go ahead and apply the crease, just so you can see the workflow. Spend a couple more minutes on that. I just don't want to bore you guys with this. But basically, you can create, you know, some very, very cool things. This crease tolerance here is actually going to control the angle that the crease occurs. There's also interesting things where you can actually decrease the level at which the crease will actually have effect on your mesh. So you can bring it down to something like 3. It will crease, the crease will affect it at those levels, and then you can divide it up further, and the crease will actually allow the mesh to smooth out from that point. So back to my presentation. We're not where we're supposed to be. So, some thoughts on actually creating low poly meshes just directly out of ZBrush. Obviously, the topology tool has been there for a while. Previously, people were using Z-spheres to re-topologize models. But actually, I want to talk about just using Decimation Master just straight up. It's particularly useful for doing environment pieces or anything that is non-deformable, has no animation. And within the context explicitly of the Infiltrator demo, Wyeth was art director on that, and he wanted to propagate the cityscape with some statues. We were running very short on time, very aggressive project schedule, and basically what we determined to do was actually just sculpt low poly, or pose low polys. So the idea was to create these kind of stylized anatomical models. I basically generated those over the course of a couple of days, male and female. And in order to get these done fast and furiously, basically I just created decimations just straight in ZBrush. I've actually highlighted these key points here just to kind of show you how closely the mesh actually matches. If you were to try to retopologize that, that would not be the case. Now, obviously this isn't going to work for something that actually needs deformation at those joints, but in this particular case, I was going to be responsible for actually posing them up, and so I could always do corrective sculpting joints and things like that. So, I'm not a rigger. I don't claim to be a rigger. I don't enjoy rigging, and so I decided to do that in ZBrush, which is something that I'd never really done before. So I used the Z-spheres within ZBrush, and the awesome thing about those is that you don't have to worry about weighting at all. It's basically you place your joints, you scale the joints appropriately, you can find your mesh, move it around. And so basically what I did, knowing that I needed several of these sculptures, basically I created layers on the Z-sphere so I could close and open the hands. We could move the head around, up and down, what have you. Most of the poses were fairly straightforward, so I didn't really need a lot of layers, but this allowed me to future-proof it if I needed to go back in and add a lot more poses to them. So this is a female pose with Z-spheres. Basically in the center we have a 50-50 blend between the original vine pose and then a more elegant pose. So this is the pose that I just showed you. Basically I exported it out after I posed it to my kind. He built within, basically these sculptures, I think both of the ones I'm going to show you were probably done within 2 or 3 days. They were extremely fast. And then this is the one that I did. There are a couple of components for maxing here. Basically, we have a huge bank of previously subdivision model meshes, and so anytime we need to cannibalize stuff like that, a lot of times we go back to things that we've already made, refine them, or what have you. And then a lot of times they'll get dinged up or whatever in ZBrush. The cloth is entirely ZBrush. So this is that model actually rendered real time within our UV4 technology, and basically we talked a lot about the infiltrator demo that we did earlier this year for GDC. And so I kind of want to leave on that note. Basically, the image that you see here is comprised of art made by a host of guys at Epic that have utilized ZBrush to create some just phenomenal art. Mike obviously put his heart and soul into that model. The weapon was made by a compadre of ours named Pete Hayes. Basically, I want to leave you guys with our demonstration of UV4 technology for GDC that we did. So